The greatest test of courage on earth is to bear defeat without losing heart. Robert Greene Ingersoll.
Inconceivable!
Will you please act like you have more than a two-word vocabulary?
Is there air? You don't know!
And now, a yak.
Yak!
Hey, don't touch that dial. You found Secular Yakking.
I'm Robert.
And I'm Amy.
After years,
No, many years of yakking at each other.
we're here to yak at you.
So sit back and enjoy the yakking.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a wonderful week.
Indeedy.
I know I had a pretty good week myself.
Did you know?
Well, sort of.
I was going to say, did
Had
you
a,
know?
had a rough end.
Yeah.
Yeah, we lost one of our alpacas this weekend.
Yeah, that was sad.
Yeah, that sucks.
Raised him from a baby.
Yeah, but that happens.
Yeah. But,
The joy of livestock, I guess.
yeah. Well, hopefully everybody had a good weekend. Can't say that everybody has.
Yeah.
Some have, some haven't.
But there was a highlight to our weekend, I think. And
There was.
yeah, we had a nice interview.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking of something else, like the fact that we bought a car, but...
Oh, well, all right, fine.
Anyways, that's...
I don't know which is better, the interview or the nice new car.
Oh, I don't know. The car was kind of sweet.
Anyway, well, we'll let you decide whether our new car or the interview is better. Yes.
No. The interview was great. I really enjoyed that
Which
interview.
we'll get into that.
Right, which is what this week's show is about.
Yeah, this week's show is the interview.
And it will be going longer than usual.
Much longer.
Yes, over an hour?
Over an
isn't
hour,
it?
yeah.
Just over an hour, I think. But it's a great interview.
But before we get into that, I got a few things to cover.
Yes, like Twitter.
We got some Twitterers.
Twitterers.
Yeah.
All right, let's see the butchering begin.
Augustine K. Carlson.
Mm-hmm.
School of Schlock.
Uh-huh.
Dark Forest Film. WSTR Star Wars Podcast. Synth.
Try again.
Synth. That's what it says. Synth.
Oh, I thought that was you.
No.
Okay.
Sinth.
So far you're doing okay?
Until now. David Shestokas.
Oh, apologize.
I think I got it right.
We'll see.
Claire McConnell. The Gin. Emilu Chad. Brian A. Bernhard.
Mm-hmm.
Inglorious Bastards. That's with a P.
Yeah, I got that.
And Philip Kowalski.
Not terrible. You've done worse.
I have done much worse.
Yes, you have. But if he butchered it as usual, he apologizes.
Yes. And if I butchered it, send me a correction. I love feedback.
Yeah.
If I didn't butcher it, send me a correction. I love feedback. Speaking of feedback.
Yes, dear.
We got an iTunes review.
Ah, sweet.
First one in a long, long time.
Yeah.
So this comes from Stuck in Walmart.
Oh, I feel bad.
5 stars.
Sweet.
I heard about secular yakking from In the Name of God. The
podcast.
There you go. You got it right. I gave it a try, and now I'm hooked. Keep the yakking coming.
Sweet. That's awesome.
That's a nice.
That's very nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stuck in Walmart. Sorry that you're stuck in Walmart, however.
Yeah, right?
Not a place I want to be stuck.
No, I just want to get in and get out as fast as possible.
Yeah.
Anyways,
so
that's cool.
So, to the interview, since there won't be any news this week, although there was a ton of news.
Yes, but because our interview went longer than our show usually does, there's no room for anything, so I guess we'll have to do it for next week.
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay.
Because there may be an interview next week as well, so.
No.
There may be an interview. It depends on how it goes this weekend.
I think you need to space yourself.
We'll see. We'll let the listeners decide.
Because, you got to cover the news you missed with the news that's coming up.
So maybe we'll have a long show next week, too.
Don't start pushing it.
Okay, fine. Anyway.
Yes.
No more suspense. So this week's interview, a yakking session is what it's really, because it's not really an interview. It's just like, it's a bunch of, or a few people got together and started yakking about cool stuff.
Right, which, again, I'm going to take my idea to call it the yakking session, because like you said, it's not formal. It's not a typical interview. It's just a yakking session to get some info out there to, hear about things. It's kind of casual.
Yeah, and maybe next time I'll have a cool soundbite to introduce it.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's going to be yet.
Oh, yeah. You always do that. Every little new, like, section that you come up with,
I did find one. I did find one that is a video of a screaming yak, but I'm not sure if I want to put that on there. I'll have to show it to you.
I'm not so sure I even want to listen to that.
Yeah, it's kind of funny.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway, enough with that. The interview is with Callie Wright from the Gaytheist Manifesto, and she is absolutely amazing.
Yes, great to talk to.
Yes, everybody seems to love Callie. She's a great person, social justice warrior all the way, and not one of those crazy social justice warriors that people hate. She's one of the good ones.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think we'll just run right into that interview.
Yep, and it's, what, about 50 minutes, I think?
An hour and 5 minutes is what it turned out to be.
Oh, did it? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so let's start this part.
And we'll come back right after the interview.
Excellent.
Joining us for the Yak session this week is Callie Wright. Callie Wright is an activist, speaker, and host of the Gaytheist Manifesto podcast, which explores the intersection of the atheist movement and the LGBTQ rights movement. Callie came out as a transgender woman in the summer of 2013, and her mission is to be a voice for the LGBTQ community in the atheist movement, and a voice for secularism in the LGBTQ community. Welcome, Callie, to the Yak session.
Hey, thanks for having me. And I actually have been accused of thinking that I am the voice. So, if that's what we're gonna go with,
All right. Well.
It could be the voice or a voice.
No, I had somebody I don't even remember what the context was, but somebody was trying to accuse me of because I do a podcast and it's named that, they were trying to accuse me of saying that I was trying to say that I was the spokesperson and that what I said was the final say and everything, and it was just really funny. It's if you've ever had any conversation with me at all, I usually fall over myself, be well, this is just me. This is just me. Other people may feel different, but yeah.
Well, glad to know that. So Callie Wright is now the voice of secularism and LGBTQ community.
Yeah, I think that's what you guys just heard, right? Me claiming to be the spokesperson.
That's exactly what I heard.
Off to a very auspicious start. This is good.
All right. So we're on the same page. We're good.
Excellent.
So I guess we have some questions, and I've listened to a few episodes of the Gaytheist Manifesto. I'm not going to say I've listened to all of them because there's 50 bajillion podcasts out there.
Right? Yeah, I have the exact same problem. There's a lot of legitimately good podcasts, and I just don't have time.
Right, but I've got to say my favorite, and probably everybody's favorite, is episode 17.
Yeah, that's one that I still get a lot of feedback about that episode, and I'm really happy. I'm super, super proud of that episode.
Yeah, that's actually the one that really introduced me to what transgender was.
Mm-hmm.
I listened to that one with you, didn't I?
Yeah, we were on our way to Tri-Cities.
Right.
And I said, you got to listen to this so that we understand what's going on. Because we supported the transgender rights issues and things like that, but we really didn't understand it. And that, episode 17 really helped us out.
It clarified a lot.
And so what I wanted to do is maybe have you give a summary on what it means to be transgender and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, if we're going to talk about the dictionary definition, or the definition that most people go by anyways, is a person who is transgender is a person who doesn't identify with the sex that they were assigned at birth. So, you're born, you have a penis, they write male on your birth certificate. You're born, you have a vagina, they write F. If you're born and you have ambiguous genitalia, if you're an intersex person, a lot of times they do invasive surgery without the parents' permission and pick one for you. That's a different issue, but
I didn't know that.
That's kind of weird.
Oh,
all right.
It's really, yeah. I'm trying to find someone who will come on the show to talk about it because it's terrible. Some of the stuff that I've read, it's not my experience, so I can't speak with authority on it. But it's something that happens, and it's horrifying.
Without their permission?
Yeah, they'll just it looks a little more like a penis than a vagina, so we'll go ahead and operate to make it that.
Well, I think as a parent, if I wasn't informed on this before they did, I would have been seriously pissed.
Yeah. And then a lot of doctors will force the parents to decide on behalf of the child instead of just saying, well, this is what you're born with, and when you get old enough, you can choose what you want to do.
Right.
So yeah, it's awful stuff. But like I said, not something I can speak with a ton of authority on because that's not my experience. But
right,
it is something that's important to bring up because it's something that does happen. But the idea is transgender is sort of an umbrella term for people who, if you're assigned male at birth, you don't identify as male, or if you're assigned female at birth, you don't identify as female. And there's kind of like a whole spectrum of identities underneath that umbrella. I'm a trans woman, so I identify as a woman, like strictly on that side of the binary. There are people who identify strictly as male on the other side of the binary, and then there are people who identify in all sorts of spectrums in between of non-binary, somewhere in between, not on the spectrum at all. So that's kind of in a nutshell what that is. I mean, obviously there's a lot that goes into that.
Right.
But sort of speaking just generally, like as an umbrella term, that's what it means.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I always assumed as well. I mean, that's just what I had thought. So that really clarified for me.
And I'm going to put a link in the show notes to episode 17 so that our listeners, not just my listeners.
Yeah, I'm not here.
So that our listeners can really get a really in-depth, because that discussion was amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was really proud of myself when I thought I needed to do that. And I think it's important too to point out there's some nuance in, when we say specifically like you identify as something other than what you were assigned at birth, because a lot of people they will kind of simplify it and boil it down to like, well, you're born a guy but identify as a girl, or vice versa. And that's still not really saying it correctly, because some people know from the time that their cognitive abilities emerge that who society and your parents and your family tells you are is not who you actually are. So, saying that you were born a guy and identify as a girl, like it's not exactly accurate to say that. So like you'll hear sort of a lot of other definitions sometimes that don't quite have that nuance, and they don't allow for that sort of difference in experience. So I think that's something that's important to point out too, that definition is worded that way very specifically to not pigeonhole people into boxes that they may not feel that they fit in. So that's something that's important to point that out too.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, I am too.
As a avid defender of transgender rights, that's something I think I need to know when I go into these situations, which I tend to accidentally do.
And get in large debates and yelling fights and
yelling. That's probably the maddest I've ever been.
And it sucks because like sometimes for expediency, like sometimes I just have to go there because I'm not like for example, I know we'll talk a little bit about this later, but like I just had weight loss surgery, and every time I talk with a nurse, they ask me why I'm on spironolactone, because spironolactone is a blood pressure medication, but it also blocks testosterone, so it's part of my hormone therapy. And so that's like an immediate red flag for them, because they're like, do you have blood pressure issues? Because that's something serious we got to know about.
Right.
So like I always have to explain, like, no, it's because I'm trans, I'm on hormones. And the nurse is like, okay, so like you were born a guy and now you're a girl. And I was just like, yeah.
Like, that's gotta be so frustrating.
Yeah. We just like, I mean, sometimes you got to turn the activist off. It's like, do I want this phone call to be 5 minutes long or 15 minutes long? Like, let's pick our battles here.
Yeah, pick the battles.
Something I got to learn to do.
Yeah, you're terrible at that, by the way.
Well, the guy deserved it.
It's an important lesson to learn, and it's one that took me a long time to learn too, so don't feel bad.
Yeah, he's definitely still learning, slowly.
Yeah, we're talking about an issue that happened about a year ago. If you remember, Washington State has initiatives, and there was the bathroom bill initiative that was coming up.
Oh, that's right. Our daughter was with you when you did this.
Oh, my God. So this guy was... And initiatives in Washington State, you got to get petitions and signatures, right? So this guy's standing in front of the store trying to get petitions, and I'm walking in with my 3 daughters, and he says, hey, would you like to protect your daughters in bathrooms?
Yeah.
And I was like...
That started
That's not what this bill's about.
Right.
And I just went off on the guy. I dropped, 10, 12 F-bombs on him.
He dropped F-bombs, and I'll tell you right now, as his wife being with him 23 years, he does not drop F-bombs often. Or hardly ever, for that matter. So, I wasn't with you. That would have been really interesting.
The girls said they were rather surprised.
Yeah, they don't see you in that kind of light. So I think they were more frightened. I mean, as far as they don't see you do that often or ever.
Yeah. So yeah, I am an avid defender of rights.
Yeah, I've had a few experiences like that lately, because like I used to be that angry person on Facebook that would just like yell at everyone about everything. And like I was always standing on a platform yelling at someone about how like something they were doing is problematic. And I actually had a friend sort of have like a come to Jesus moment with me, and he was like, "Look, Callie, you're one of my best friends. I love you to death. The person you are on Facebook is not the person you are in real life."
I agree.
So
with my husband, sorry.
Yeah.
So that's how he is.
Yeah. So I went back and I scrolled through my Facebook post, and I was like, holy crap, like he's right. Like if you just knew me through Facebook, you'd probably think I was like a terrible, angry, hateful person. And like, that's not who I am. And so like, I've sort of tried to shift that. And I think I've gone like to the extreme other side, where I think people don't realize that there's that side to me at all. And there have been a couple of times where I've like made sort of like mean jokes or said something that was slightly angry, and people are like, Callie, oh my God, I can't believe that from you. And I'm like, really? Have you met me? So like, but I mean, I would rather be thought of as that extremely nice person and surprise people when every once in a while I do the angry thing than vice versa, you know? But it's just really funny. Like I'll say something like I don't remember exactly the context. I was on somebody else's show, and somebody said something like, well, maybe you shouldn't have me in the intro anymore. And I was like, well, or you could just like not have him in the show anymore. And somebody was like, oh my God, Callie, I think that's the meanest thing you've ever said. And I was like, sweetheart.
That's funny.
Yeah. I'm kind of the same way. I'll get...
That's just like you.
Yeah, I know.
Everyone who sees and meets him in person knows he's, the quiet, nice guy. And then sometimes when he gets on Facebook and he gets in these rants, it's like, who the hell are you?
Well, I'm generally, I'm not mean, but I'm also not polite.
No, but
Right.
you sometimes get in these weird fits that you just like, okay, I've had enough, and you go off on them.
Yeah, that's true.
And I'm the one that's always toning him down, saying, you catch more, flies with honey or something. And, you could actually get at them better when you don't show that kind of anger and kind of just hit them with facts and, whatnot. And they have nothing to say at that point,
Yeah, I know.
Well,
but anyways,
it's hard
that's
because I actually have that conversation a lot with people. It's like the whole like firebrand versus diplomat. Like it's like that eternal argument, especially like within the atheist community. Is like, how do you approach advocating for your position or like engaging with the people that are on the other side of the issue? And I'll be honest, I personally have seen minds changed by outlandishly aggressive and dickish things that people have said, because it sort of shocks people out of their complacence.
right.
And I'm actually kind of one of those people. Like it wasn't just this singular thing, but one of the things that made me, and I was a lukewarm Christian. I was never like fundamentalist, deeply entrenched in the church. So like my faith wasn't super hard to shake anyways. But there was a kid that I went to school with. I think this was in 9th grade. And I one day, like after hanging out with him a whole bunch, we liked the same authors. We were both Star Trek fans and everything like that. And then one day I heard him just going off about Christianity and like saying all of these terrible things. And I'm like, I'm Christian, and he's saying all these things, and I'm like, but like, I know atheists are terrible people, right? But like, he's a good person. And I like him a lot, and he's really smart, and he's saying all this stuff. Like, he's got to be missing something. So like, I went and looked into it, and that was kind of one of the things that sort of started me down my path out of religion. So it's like, it's really hard for me to dismiss the firebrand approach outright, because like, I've been a beneficiary of it. But like, I've also changed a lot of people's minds by being very nice and gentle and patient. And like, it's really hard to know which approach is going to work. Like, you never know going in which approach is going to work, because there are some people who won't respect you if you approach with the like gentle, soft, nice approach.
Right.
Right.
And then there are some people who will immediately turn off the second you're anything but perfectly diplomatic. So like, I think that's part of one of the things that makes these conversations so difficult, because I usually just tell people like, you engage with what fits best for your personality. And the thing that I think happens a lot of times, and I think this applies equally to people on the firebrand and diplomat side, is that I think a lot of people get more caught up in what makes them feel good than what they think is effective.
Yes.
I can pat myself on the back because I was nice to this person. Or I can pat myself on the back for yelling into the echo chamber and making myself feel real good about telling off the believer about how stupid they are.
Right.
It's all in terms of making that person feel better about themselves, as opposed to a thought of, what's actually effective in this conversation, like what's most likely to change this person's mind. And I think everyone would do well to shift their thinking more in that direction, as opposed to like just what works best or what feels best.
Right.
So
I have to say, he not to interrupt here, I was just going to say that he does tend to do that the majority of the time. You know, what would be the most effective that would get through to him and, you know, make a change or difference, or at least get a tiny bit in their head, you know?
Yeah, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So
Yeah.
It's just the nature of what we do.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
So, a little bit back on the transgender. When did you know that you were transgender?
I was about 10,
Okay.
and a lot of people's experiences are that, you know, they know from the time that their cognitive abilities emerge. Like, as soon as you become self-aware, you know that, like, everybody's treating you like a girl and you're not one, or vice versa. Or, you know, somewhere in between. And that wasn't exactly my experience. For me, it was, you know, puberty and sort of feeling really wrong about the way that my body was changing in puberty, and seeing the way that the girls' bodies were changing during puberty, and just sort of feeling like that's what's supposed to be happening to me right now. And so it was kind of, there was one day I was at lunch, and my friend that I usually ate lunch with was out of school that day, so I was just kind of hanging out by myself. And it was just like, you know, swirling in my head, and eventually it was one of those things where, like, I've heard of other people having moments like this where something is, like, so strong in your head you have to say it out loud. And I literally, like, I turned my head so no one would see me, and I was like involuntarily had to say it out loud, like I was supposed to be a girl. And you know, and then eventually, you know, I started thinking about, like, exactly what that would mean. And, like, obviously, you know, this was me 22 years ago. So, you know, I had no idea that transgender people existed, that this was a thing that happens to people, that, you know, this is a real thing. And so, like, the only thing that I thought at that point was fear, because, like, I saw how cruel kids were to you know, guys who were associated with anything, you know, in any way feminine. It's like I saw, you know, even at that young age, how those stereotypes and those roles are forced on people, and enforced, like, brutally enforced. And so, I mean, I knew exactly what it would mean to step outside of that. So I was like, I just can't tell anyone this, and I need to do my best to just forget about it. And, you know, fortunately or unfortunately, I was successful in doing that for a really long time. And, you know, there were times in my life where it was something I could put on the back burner and kind of forget about. I was, you know, busy with other things and, you know, just doing life. You know, and then there were times where I would just lay awake in bed crying at night because there was nothing else that I could think about. And, you know, went through a couple of cycles of that until I was 28. And then, you know, those feelings kind of started to get a little stronger and a little worse than they ever had. And then so I was like, I have to tell someone about this. And, you know, at that point there were still a lot of questions. I was like, you know, is it just a fetish? Is this, like, do I just like cross-dressing? Am I just an effeminate guy? Like, what does this even mean? But it kind of became one of those things where, like, it was going to kill me if it continued to exist only in my head for much longer. So, you know, I finally started reaching out to people and, you know, did a really sort of deep period of introspection and, you know, figured out who I was, and kind of came crashing out of the closet. The first time I talked to anyone about it out loud, I think, was in May of 2013, and I came out publicly in August that year.
Wow.
So
That's amazing.
It's so funny because that story sounds a lot like what my daughters tell me. I think today with teenagers that it's more accepted than it used to be, because my daughters have a transgender friend, and it doesn't seem to be as detrimental, I guess you could say, as it used to be 20 years ago. I mean, it's, I want to say, somewhat easier, but still hard. But at the same time, it's not, you know, it's not like it was before, because it's so much more out there now, and it's slowly getting more accepted, at least for sure, than, you know, say 20 years ago.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think it's in pockets. I think a lot of times in more liberal areas. I mean, you've got schools that have Gay Straight Alliance groups, and you have, members of the faculty who, put rainbow stickers on their door to identify them as, safe LGBT allies.
Right.
And so those things are awesome. But I still also hear just awful stories of, people being bullied into suicide and that kind of stuff.
Right.
So it's it's definitely getting a lot better in some places, and it feels like it really hasn't changed at all in some places too.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right on that, as far as, because here it's just it's more open and liberal, and you tend to see more of that aspect of it. But whereas you go, like you said, in other pockets of this country, it's like, oh my God, we ain't moving at all, And
yeah,
it's
and sometimes you find it in surprising places. There was a convention in Nashville, the Nashville Nuns Convention. We went to the first one last year, and they actually had it at a high school in Nashville, and I was like, wow, there's a high school in Nashville that's letting us have an atheist convention.
Yeah, that is surprising.
And I'm like, what is the deal with this high school? And then we walk into the school, and the first thing that we see is a mural of pro-choice posters.
Oh, that's awesome.
And
That's
then there's every teacher's door has one of those safe rainbow stickers. And there's a hallway that's all about feminism and a hallway that's all about racial justice. And I'm like, this is I know it's Nashville, but it's still the South. What the hell is going on? And I guess maybe that's probably some prejudice on my part. Obviously there are plenty of people in the South that are that are allies.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was just kind of an eye-opening experience. These things do happen, and sometimes they happen in unexpected places. So yeah, it is really cool to see that.
Yeah, I was just thinking for the South, that's, promising for, what the future holds,
Yeah.
just to find a pocket like that.
Yeah. Which brings me to another quick question. Why is it important for a secular activist like me and Amy to support the transgender movement? And why should the opposite also be true?
Well, so as far as why people who are into secular activism should support trans rights and queer rights, and honestly, I would say social justice issues in general, is the way I look at it, there are two reasons to care about the conversation surrounding religion. And I don't mean that there are two reasons to hold a particular belief. What I'm saying is that there are two reasons to hold to actively care about the conversation surrounding religion. And the first is because you enjoy the intellectual exercise. And that's I don't want to say that like it's a bad thing, but if you're a person who just enjoys sort of the academic, intellectual, philosophical exercise of discussing religion, that's one reason that I can see a person actively caring about the conversation. And the other reason, and these are the only two that I can think of, the other reason is because you understand that religion is a net harm in the world, and you want to do something about that. And if we look honestly at the harm that's done by religion, we have to acknowledge that the worst harm done by religion is done to people who are in marginalized communities.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that.
Christianity was the excuse used to justify slavery.
Yes.
So, as far as United States history goes, it goes back to the very beginning of oppression. And then, people who are fighting against LGBT rights are leading with their Bibles, and because Christianity has privilege, that argument holds weight. They don't have to make a rational argument. All they have to do is say God said so, and there's a whole droves of people who will be like, oh, okay, yeah. So if you're a person who actively cares about the harm religion does to the world, I think you have to acknowledge that, if we're talking specifically about LGBT rights, you have to acknowledge the fact that we are a community who has been done disproportionate harm by religion. So it would make sense to stand with us against that harm.
And I certainly agree with you on both those points, actually.
And then if we're talking about vice versa, why LGBTQ folks should be involved in atheism and secularism. This is a particular passion of mine because I've found, generally speaking, if you talk to people who are in the atheist movement, they're usually pretty on board. It's usually just like the cesspools of comment sections where people are awful about it. If you're talking about people who do podcasts, people who do real life activism, who run meetup groups and secular organizations and conventions and stuff like that. Generally speaking, you do not have to convince them that it's important to be an ally to people of color or trans people or queer people, so on and so forth. But I have noticed a lot of hesitation in the queer and trans community about the word atheism or secularism because, there are a lot of people in that community who, like, their faith is the only thing they held on to that kept them alive. Like when your parents hate you, your community hates you, your school hates you, no one in your family cares for you. Sometimes the only friend that you have is God, and that's what gets people through. And, I don't respect that in the sense that I think that's a valid thing to do, but I think we need to be actively working to give people better alternatives than that, So I think we have to recognize that at the very least, secular activism, maybe not atheist activism, but at the very least, secular activism is what keeps us safe. Right? Because again, if we're talking about the arguments used to justify opposing marriage equality or opposing trans people in bathrooms or opposing, gay couples being able to adopt, so on and so forth, people try and dress it up and use all of these like sort of pseudoscientific, sort of like vaguely plausible sounding explanations. But what it really comes down to is because God. So if we erode religious privilege and we take the weight off of the argument that says God said so, then I think by default we're doing queer and trans people a service there. So I think, if we're talking about like the American atheist style of firebrand, we want everyone to leave their religion, we want everyone to be atheist, I probably don't. And I'm not necessarily saying what they do is a bad thing, but I'm saying I probably don't have an argument to tell a queer or a trans person they should involve themselves in that specific thing because of who they are. But if we're talking about secular activism specifically, I think every member of that community should be on board with the goals of secular activism because frankly, that's what protects us and that's what gains us rights.
I couldn't agree more with that entire thing.
Yeah. And I was talking specifically about secular activism. There's a huge difference between atheist activism and secular activism.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But
regardless of what David Silverman says.
Yeah, I really agree with all of that. I mean, a different outlet, to turn to.
Right.
I really think that's important.
Yeah, we ran into an issue here a few years back where we, during the marriage equality campaign in Washington, one of the atheist groups raised a lot of money to give to them, and they didn't want to accept it because they would have had to put an atheist logo on their website. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the same thing. They didn't want to be affiliated with the atheist, even though the atheists were hugely supportive.
Yeah, I've had people. I've had people who aren't associated with atheism and secularism in any way. Like I don't want to name names and like try and shame people or anything like that. But there was a specific group of people that there was news about at one point, and I reached out to this group and asked them to be on my show to talk about it, and they refused because it was an atheist show. So yeah, it's definitely something that I've run into, and like honestly, I was really surprised by that. Like. When I first started getting into activism, like, it took a couple of different things for me to recognize that, secular activism and queer and trans activism, went together. Like, even when I was convinced that both were important, I still saw them as entirely separate entities. But I was really surprised at how a lot of folks, just don't ever want to have anything to do with it and are like offended by the notion of secularism. Like, when Leila Alcorn committed suicide, that happened in Cincinnati. So like it was where I live. So that's my community. And, I was part of the planning committee for the vigil that we held, and everyone was talking about how it would be sort of like a powerful statement to have it at an affirming church because of, her. For those who don't know the story, basically she committed suicide because her parents were conservative Christians, wouldn't accept her, sent her to conversion therapy, isolated her from her friends, took away access to social media and all those awful things. And so like they thought like, well, because of the context surrounding this, like it'd be a powerful gesture to have this at an affirming church. And I was like, yeah, except the fact that she was an atheist, she was not fond of religion, and oh, by the way, that's the reason she killed herself in the first place. Right. So I think it would be a pretty inappropriate gesture to do that. And so, I fought it, and like that actually made me a really unpopular person for a while. And I mean, there are people who still hold a grudge over that. And then I was on the planning committee for the Transgender Day of Remembrance 2 years ago. And, they brought the program, and it was like, opening prayer, a word from Pastor so-and-so. And I was like, where is the representation for other people? And like, and I even made the argument, like, I was like, I'm not saying that there should be no religion at all in this, but like, there's an interfaith pride committee in Cincinnati that's made up of clergy from a bunch of different religions. So like, the trans community is as diverse as any other, pagans, Buddhists, Hindus, Muslims, Christians, so on and so forth. So it's like, I'm not even trying to make this thing atheistic, but I'm saying there is literally no good reason to have Christianity be the only viewpoint represented here. Like, it would be very easy to be more inclusive than that. And I mean, I got into a shouting match with someone over that. Like, I was the atheist in the room arguing for more religion in the thing. And I was angrily accused of trying to erase Christianity and, try to make this an atheist ceremony. And, someone told me that I was being insensitive to her needs. And this is a person I wasn't intensely fond of in the first place. So I was like, if your need is to be the only viewpoint represented, then I am entirely and unapologetically insensitive to that need. But I was shocked by that, because if you look at the polling that's been done, people who identify somewhere on the LGBT spectrum, it's about half are non-religious. And that doesn't mean that they call themselves atheists, but that means that, if somebody asks them to tick a box on their religious affiliation, they tick none. So like, I was shocked that there seemed to be very little awareness of or respect of that fact. Like, I was absolutely shocked. Like, I knew, like, of course, there are going to be plenty of religious people in the community, but they're probably going to be a little bit more comfortable with the idea of atheism and secularism than other groups tend to be. And like, maybe a little bit, but not really. And people, I can see people get visibly uncomfortable when I start talking about, secularism or atheism.
Yeah, I find it interesting that there's such a concept of Christian privilege even in the LGBT community. You would think that would be one place that didn't promote such a view as well, but they still seem to have it. That's
well, weird. The way that I look at it is, you're taught that as a kid, and it's an idea that's planted into your head, and like, usually it takes a pretty monumental thing to shake that loose, or like a bunch of small stuff over a long period of time. And again, I think it's, people, if you're raised with the idea that God is a thing, and you're taught that, homosexuality is a sin, or, being trans is a sin, or even like, being an effeminate guy is a sin, or a masculine woman is a sin, I think it's a lot easier to do the gymnastics to get yourself to God with God is okay with who I am, than to get to God doesn't exist. And so, I leave it to Bible scholars to argue over whether or not the Bible actually condemns homosexuality. I tend to think that it does, but I've heard pretty convincing arguments otherwise. But I just think it's an easier place to get to, and you don't have to give up that sort of like warmth and comfort that people get from religion, and people desperately hold on to that. And again, like, for a lot of people, that's their entire community. The local queer affirming church. If you leave there, where's your community? There's a really, really great author and speaker named Fernando Alcantar, and his book's called To the Cross and Back. It's a great book, and he's an amazing person, amazing speaker. I've had him on the show. And he gave a speech at the Secular Student Alliance convention, and he was talking about, touring the world as this mega, this like big time, big name preacher, charismatic Christian preacher. And the entire time he's struggling with, I don't know if I really believe in this, and I'm also gay, and I think that means God hates me. And he's like, where are the atheists for people like that? The atheists are too busy. They've got papers to write. They've got debates to prepare for. They've got experiments to do, and it was this sort of, I guess it was a really powerful commentary on the fact that I think sometimes our community fails in providing that same sense of community. to people. And I think people would rather hold on to that community along with those religious beliefs that they may not necessarily be so strong in than to give up that community for something that they're like not even sure exists. So like I think the other thing too is I hear a lot of people say like, like, I don't know how a black person could be Christian. I don't know how a woman could be Christian because like, the Bible says pretty terrible things about all of those groups of people. But like, I also think that's sort of unfair because that's expecting those groups of people to somehow be less susceptible to religious indoctrination than your average person. Because like, I mean, the Bible says that you're terrible just because you were born. You know what I mean? Like you can just start at being born and you're already awful.
Yeah,
so
that original sin idea.
I heard that my whole childhood.
Right. So like I think it's almost an unfair burden in some ways to be like, well, God, I don't know how you can be gay and Christian, or I don't know how you can be black and Christian, So like it's hard. Indoctrination is a powerful thing when that's a thing that you're taught by. I mean, we're kind of wired to believe authority. When we're kids, we believe our parents, we believe the adults in charge, our pastors, our coaches, our teachers, those kinds of things. We're sort of wired to accept the reality that they hand to us. And so once that happens, it's an incredibly difficult thing to get rid of, even with those other mitigating circumstances, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, not being heavily religious myself and never really being a community person, it is hard for me to understand that mindset. It really is. But I get it. I do grasp the concept of community, I guess.
Yeah, I grew up Catholic, so I get that no matter what you do, you're sinful. It doesn't matter.
Right.
So I totally get that. And I do see the community aspect that they that they have in churches. I was never one that needed that. And even now as an adult, I don't need that. But I do see, not only religious communities, but non-religious communities, how they do need that group, that community, that support and everything.
Yeah, which is why I'm a supporter of the Oasis projects and stuff like that. I just don't attend them.
Right.
So. Yeah, and I mean that's totally valid. If you're not a person who needs that, I am a person who desperately needs that. Like if I don't have community, I've got nothing. It's
right.
And that's that's common. I mean, generally speaking, in one way or another, humans are social creatures. Like I think there are some people who are genuinely misanthropic, and that's fine. And if you're happy, not as a member of a larger community like that, in one way or another, like I'm all for that. But I do think it's more common than not to have sort of an ingrained need for something resembling that kind of community.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Yeah. I'm an oddball, so what can I say?
Yeah. And that's why I support those communities as well. While I may not attend them, I understand that other people do need that community.
And we understand how the majority of people do need that community because, yes, humans are, they need that support and that group and that someone to talk to, someone to lean on, someone to vent to. And for me, I guess, honey, you're just all I need.
Yeah, okay. Sure,
I mean,
that's what it is.
No, I'm a lone wolf. For me, I don't need the big community because that's just how I am. I mean, right. I like being, in small groups. I actually kind of freak out in large groups. Don't like large groups too much, or, we go to events all the time, but I'd prefer not to go as often as we need to and stuff. Yeah. So for me, it's just not that kind of thing. I'm that kind of person that like to go sit out in the woods by myself and just listen to nature and relax and chill and whatnot.
Yeah. I get that.
And I even run a humanist group out here in Washington, which is really odd for someone who's not into groups.
I know. Go figure.
So that's how I support it.
Yeah, he's the president of a group over here in this area. So it's weird how we do things, and yet we like other, we like the opposite kind of things,
Yeah. Well, I think putting something together and leading that because like you see a need and you decide to fill it is it's another thing. Because I mean my girlfriend is not as extroverted as I am, but like she spent some time running a group for trans and gender nonconforming students on her college campus. So it's like she's not. I'm a social person. I can fit into pretty much any group of people if I decide that I want to.
Right.
And she's just, she doesn't like big crowds and that kind of stuff. But like, you care about something, you see a need, you decide to do something about it, and you fill it. Even though if it's like, I don't know that I would necessarily need that, but I know a lot of other people do. So like, I'm going to step up and do something about it. Like, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's kind of us in a nutshell. We prefer not to be in crowds and need to go to, the group things, but yet at the same time, we see a need for, like activism. And so we run groups, we run podcasts and stuff. And I don't know about you, babe, but for me, when I'm in group situations, I adapt really well to and I don't know what that is all about, but I prefer not to be in that situation. But when I am, I'm really good at it, and I've been told that. It's kind of weird for me to kind of get that. I don't understand that, but
oh god, yeah. Honestly, there are times where I wish I was less good at it.
Yeah,
because, like
exactly.
because obviously, like if I'm in a group of people that I like, I am like 100% social butterfly. Like I'll be in the conversation all night, having a good time, laughing, joking, all that kind of stuff. But I also have that like, I can small talk and talk about nothing with the rest of them if I really want to. I hate it. It makes me want to stick a fucking screwdriver in my ear. But like there are times where it's necessary. Like, I got invited to this dinner that it was a group of like 30. It was like this leadership training that a group of like 30 different like bigwig CEOs in Cincinnati were doing. And so what they do is they set up these dinners after this like day-long training thing. They set up these dinners with members of marginalized communities. So like they had a dinner with like a Muslim family, with a couple of trans people, and that kind of thing. And so somebody asked me if I wanted to participate in that, and I'm like, I think that's important stuff to do. Those are people who are in positions of power to. If they don't have, a non-discrimination policy at their company, or if their company doesn't have trans-inclusive insurance, like those things can be important because it puts a human face on things.
Right.
So like it's important for me to do. It's not something I'm going to do because I think it's fun. And
right.
I mean, I can sit there at dinner and do the gab thing all night long. Everyone loves me. Everybody's laughing, and I'm just like, Jesus Christ, when is this over?
That is so me.
That's me after 5 minutes. I can't small talk. I wish I could.
See, I'm good at that. I'm good at the small talk, and I'll just like be like outside myself, like, who the hell are you?
Right.
I mean, what am I doing? And I'm just ranting and doing and mingling, and then going home, I'm like, God, why am I like that? And because I prefer not, I'd rather one, not be like that, and two, I feel like I should be more antisocial. Like that's what I would like. But when I'm in the situation, I'm like right in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's over with. I'm like, okay, let's recap for a second. I literally just spent 10 minutes talking about how rainy it's been lately. Like, what the hell is wrong with me? Like, I hate this.
So get that.
Yeah. I like I said, I suck at small talk.
You do. You really do.
I am horrible at it.
Yeah, you
like
really
I worked
are.
in retail for a long time, so it's partially a natural gift. Like it's just kind of how I am naturally, but it's also a lot of like sales training and stuff like that. Like trying to sell TVs and surround sound systems to people. And, like
I think I would make a good salesperson. Actually,
I'm horrible at that too. I tried to sell vacuums.
I've never tried it, but
I couldn't even sell vacuums to my parents.
Yeah.
I've never tried it, but I bet I'd be pretty good. See, I'm Italian and I'm from back east, so
gotcha.
big Italian family. We don't shut up, so
right.
I know that's where that came from.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get into something else you're doing recently or have done, and that is your recent foray into weight loss surgery.
Yeah.
So let's do some discussion on that. What kind of surgery did you have? Because I know there's a couple different types.
There are. So there are three major ones that are done now. The gastric band, the Roux-en-Y gastric bypass, and the vertical sleeve gastrectomy, also known as the gastric sleeve. And I actually had the sleeve done because it's the least drastic, or it's the less drastic of the actual surgeries. The gastric band. Basically, they just put like a band around your stomach that you can like pump saline into or let saline out of. It's not permanent, and the plan is that it eventually gets removed. So of the permanent surgeries, the one that I had is the less drastic and invasive. Basically, they go in and they remove 80% of your stomach. is what it comes down to. It's not anything more complicated than that, really. So like it leaves your stomach like the length and shape of a banana and about the width of a garden hose.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't fit much food into that.
Well, yeah, and that's the idea. So, so like I've struggled with my weight literally in my entire life almost. So like a couple of years before puberty, even like I just knew that I was bigger than the other kids, and like for a while it was like not much bigger, but a little bigger, and then eventually, I started this journey 6 months ago at 403 pounds. 403. It sounded like I said 430. So, but it's something that I've struggled with on and off for my entire life, and it got to the point where it started causing me some pretty serious emotional issues, and not emotional issues in the sense that like I think I'm worth less or that I'm a bad person because of my size, but like generally in life, I'm a pretty A-type personality. Like I'm ambitious. I go out and get things. I make things happen. I network. I make friends. I talk to people. Like that's how I am. So it was a really big deal for me emotionally that I couldn't take that same, A-type personality thing and make things happen with weight loss. Like I felt like I was like failing myself. And so like I would go back and forth with that, but like my size never caused me health problems really. So it was something that kind of never was brought into stark focus for me, because for me it was always like in the future, like this is going to cause me problems in the future if I don't do something about it. And like stuff like that a lot of times is easy to forget about or to put off because I'm dealing with whatever problems and issues I have right now. And so, eventually, like, I got diagnosed with a horrifyingly severe case of sleep apnea that, like, thankfully is under control. And then I started having problems with my joints, and I noticed myself on my, like, 20 feet walk from the parking lot into work, I was getting winded, and, like, it was hard to do one flight of stairs. And so, like, that kind of, I have to do something about this. This is not a future thing. This is a now thing. This has to happen. And so I was just kind of reading through, stuff, and the idea of surgery had come up, and it was something I actually considered a long time ago, but I think I was considering it for what would have been the wrong reasons for me. My ex had it, and her attitude was very much that, this weight loss surgery is the golden solution, and I, go to sleep, wake up, and everything just happens, and like that's 100% not the case. And she ended up screwing the whole thing up. She lost a ton of weight, gained it all back, and has had to have surgery. She had a bowel obstruction that almost killed her.
That sucks.
And so when I was considering it before, it was very much like I want to be skinny. You can have a complicated conversation about motivations when it comes to weight loss, but I'll just say that for me, that would have been the wrong reason to do it. But now that brought my health concerns pretty starkly into focus. And so I started really considering it, and I decided this is a thing that I'm going to do. And so I went through this 6-month program that my insurance required that I was really pissed off about at first, but going through it, I actually came around to the idea that I think it was a good thing because it taught me good habits and prepared me for, what to expect after surgery. I got used to eating 5 or 6 times a day instead of 2 or 3. And I got used to making sure that I was drinking a shit ton of water all the time. And, got more accustomed to eating the healthier foods that I enjoy as opposed to the awful foods that I enjoy and that kind of thing. So I was able to lose 60 pounds before my surgery even.
Wow.
Just from, working with my dietitian, and there's this really great book called The Diet Fix that I would highly recommend to anyone who has struggling with weight issues, because it's all 100% evidence-based. There's no fad diet or anything like that. It's a doctor who does he doesn't do surgeries, but he does medically supervised weight loss. And basically he just goes through here are all the studies that have been done on people who have lost weight and kept it off successfully, and here's what they do. And it's really all the stuff, if you've ever talked to a dietitian before, someone who's actually gone to school for it, it's all the stuff, focus on protein, eat less calories than you burn every day, measure everything you eat, journal everything you eat, and do some moderate exercise. It really kind of comes down to that.
Yeah. Well, you're sitting there talking all these things, and everything you're saying, Amy's looking at me like, yeah. And yeah.
No, no, that's not what I'm doing. I'm giving him these looks. I'm giving him these looks like, how many times have I told you this? So Robert and I are not small people.
Mm-hmm.
We are overweight for sure. I personally myself have always struggled with weight, so I totally get all of that. And, you know, right now, Robert and I were 42 right now at the same time. And, you know, we're overweight and we're getting up there in age. And, you know, I'm constantly telling him about how we need to exercise more and we need to eat like this more. And so while you were talking, I'm giving him all these looks like, and that's what we're supposed to be doing. Yep. And that's what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. Well, and what's cool is like, and this is, it's logical, you know, like when I read what the guy was saying in the book, I was like, duh. Like, I know this stuff, but like, it's not something that you like. Basic stuff like if you're miserable, you're never going to stick with it. If you're torturing yourself, you're never going to stick with it. So like, you can't do those things. Like, you have to be eating food that you enjoy eating. Yes. And you know, you can't torture yourself. You can't starve yourself. That stuff doesn't work. That's like, you can't get your weight under control doing that stuff. So it's like, you know, the idea is to retool your diet to where you're eating foods that you enjoy in reasonable amounts. And like for example, I've found that I like turkey sausage just as much as I ever liked pork sausage.
Oh,
so like
okay,
that's an obvious thing for me. And obviously, you know, everybody's going to be different, but like, you know, the calories aren't a ton different between the two, but there's a ton less fat in turkey sausage versus pork sausage. So like, that's a really easy substitution for me to make that I'm not enjoying my food any less when I do that.
Right. No, I completely get that.
Yeah. So it's just like different little things like that. And I was able to, to, you know, nail that system down to, and I mean, I had a lot of weight to lose. Obviously I was over 400 pounds, you know, so like that's part of the reason that it was able to come off so fast is because I had so much to lose in the first place. But yeah, I mean, just doing that, I was able to lose 60 pounds before I started my like pre-surgery liquid diet. And then I've lost a little over 20 since then. So I'm a total of just over 80 pounds down. But yeah, and you know, if you look at the just strictly looking at the numbers, bariatric surgery is actually the only statistically reliable method for sustainable weight loss. And that doesn't mean that people can't or haven't done it without surgery, obviously, but I mean, it's exceedingly rare that happens. And I don't think that's because surgery is the only way to do it, but it's because I think there's so much bad information out there, and you know, people buying into, you know, do this one thing and you'll get skinny, and sort of buying into, like, I think it even comes down to people wanting to lose weight for the wrong reasons because of vanity instead of health, for example.
Yeah.
You know, and it 100% was a health thing for me. I was like, you know what, my biological dad had diabetes and heart problems, and like there's no doubt in my mind I'm staring down the barrel of that as I get older. You know, so you know, things like that, and you know, my doctor put this slide up when I was doing the initial presentation that he goes through, and it's like all of these weight related health problems, and it's like, you know, 75% of people who come to me with obstructive sleep apnea leave without it. You know, it's like 60% of people who come to me with type 2 diabetes leave without it. And, you know, just, and I don't honestly remember if those are the real numbers or not, but I mean, they were really high numbers like those. And it's like, wow, this is powerful, you know? And it's, again, you know, the surgery isn't the only way to do it. You know, like I was able to be successful, and I probably would have been able to sustain, what I was doing with just my diet. I just don't know if I would have, you know, gotten down enough to satisfy where I want to be for what I think is healthy. And so it's definitely possible. It just doesn't happen very often. And I think it's because people don't have the tools, honestly.
Now, I do have one question for you. Is there a minimum weight that you have to be over in order to qualify to get this surgery?
Depends on who you
have to be at least 100 pounds over, that kind of thing.
So most insurance companies want you to have a BMI of 40 or over to cover it. And
Robert and I are like, thumbs up.
Yeah. I mean, mine was 59 when I started. And you know, there's a lot of argument. You know, BMI is not like a stalwart, like 100% accurate predictor of health. because it doesn't take into account body fat percentages and stuff like that. But like,
Right.
it generally speaking, from my understanding, if you look at the data, it works for the average person. If you're an elite athlete, it's probably not a good way to measure who you are.
Yeah, because I've read instances where bodybuilders had like BMIs that were way off the scale.
Exactly. And BMI was designed with the average person in mind. It was not designed as a way to measure the health of, elite athletes and stuff like that. But so yeah, for insurance companies, generally your BMI has to be over 40, and most surgeons won't do it unless you have a BMI of over 40. But there are some surgeons who will. I've heard of people who, and this may be just because I have the skewed perspective of like, I'm coming at this from over 400 pounds. So like what, but like, I mean, I've heard of people who were like average height and like 165 pounds and had weight loss surgery.
Wow.
And it's, I don't know that person's health situation, so like I'm not going to make any kind of value judgment on that decision. Right. But it's just, on the surface, it seems extreme to me to have surgery to lose 30 pounds. But like, maybe that 30 pounds made the difference between diabetes and not diabetes. You know what I mean? So like, I don't, like I said, I don't want to make a judgment. It just seems sort of on the surface to be, to be sort of outlandish like that. But yeah, generally speaking, that's the standard. I think different insurance companies have different standards. Like some insurances won't cover it if it's just a BMI thing, but like if you have to have what are called like comorbid conditions, so like you have to have other weight related health problems. Like I know in Ohio for Medicaid to cover it, you have to have a BMI of over 40 and also have 2 complicating conditions, which is ridiculous. So like you'd have to have like sleep apnea and diabetes, but if you only had diabetes, they wouldn't cover it. So like you have to get more sick before they cover it, which is
that makes no sense either.
We don't prevent anything here.
Yeah.
That's a whole other conversation.
Yes,
right.
No,
I mean,
know.
I'm lucky enough to work for an employer that has a pretty generous healthcare plan that is a little bit less generous now, but thankfully I was able to get my surgery in before they took that coverage away, because my new insurance as of January 1st doesn't actually cover the kind of surgery I had.
That's funny that you mentioned that, because that was actually going to be one of my questions in the beginning, is about insurance covering it, but you happened to mention it when you were, initially talking about it, because I didn't know if, insurance covered that or not. I'm sure ours doesn't, though, because we have so crappy insurance, it's not even funny. But yeah, I wasn't even sure if insurances, would cover that.
Worth looking into, though.
And I got kind of lucky, and when they did my my phone check-in for surgery, they actually ran the numbers for me on insurance, and they were like, "You've already met your deductible," because like I guess my office visits for the prior 6 months counted towards my deductible for the surgery, which like, and I haven't gotten the final bill yet, so like this could all be crap. But she was like, you have a $3,000 out-of-pocket maximum for the year, and you have $1,750 left in that. And I was like, so unless there's some other sort of insurance company trickery there, which like there very well may be, like that may end up being all of this cost me out of pocket, and like that's still a pretty significant amount of money. But for me, it's at least mostly manageable. As long as they'll let me do a payment plan, I can pay it off in a few months.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So I mean, I got lucky. I mean, self-pay, I know my surgeon on self-pay, it's $15,000.
Wow.
Yeah. But I've also heard that you can get legitimately quality surgery in Mexico for like $4,000 or $5,000.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I don't mean that like stereotypically seedy like back alley. I mean like legitimately good healthcare surgery for that amount of money. And and there was a second, honestly, where I kind of considered that, but trans folks don't generally fare well in South America. So
I could
imagine.
Yeah. No, but I find that actually really interesting.
Yeah, I'll put the diet fix in the show notes so people can get a hold of that if they want it.
Yeah,
I want to check out that book.
I would love for the author to let me to like sponsor my show or something, because like I promote his book enough. But
yeah,
I emailed him to try and get him on the show, and he never responded. So.
Oh.
Oh well.
Which sucks, because I've heard him on other podcasts, so I know he does interviews.
Oh, yeah, really.
Yeah, I mean, he may not want to associate with an atheist. I don't know. Like I said, he never responded, so I don't really know. But
it's a possibility.
Yeah, it's been an interesting experience. Getting used to a stomach that is like, 4 ounces or so big.
Wow.
being in being in a high level of pain for an extended period of time was a new experience for me. And, being like utterly incapacitated for a week, like those were all new things for me. Like first time I ever had surgery of any kind in my life, never had anesthesia before, never taken painkillers before, like never taken anything stronger than high dose ibuprofen for pain. So like, yeah, it was
poor sheltered child.
I know, right? Like it was utterly new. And honestly, like I went in with expectations of the worst. Like I'm going to wake up in searing pain and I'm going to be drugged out of my mind. And it wasn't really the case. Like, I mean, I very clearly remember waking up in the OR or the OR, the post-op area. And I was in pain and it was kind of bad, but it wasn't unbearable. And like the pain meds that they gave me at first just made me sleepy. They didn't make me loopy or high or anything like that. Then they gave me Percocet, and I hate. Like, I'm really glad that it made me hurt less, but I hate the way narcotics make me feel.
Oh,
like,
I absolutely agree.
Oh, I don't like them at all.
I don't like being high. I don't like that feeling at all.
I feel
I took them when I needed them because the pain was bad enough that I had to. But
they just make me want to puke.
Gosh,
that
never
throw me off so bad.
Yeah, and they told me that was a side effect, like of the surgery and of the pain medication, that it can make you nauseous.
So double doozy there.
And yeah, well, and I mean, they gave me a big prescription for nausea medication. Thankfully, I never needed it. I've never felt like overly nauseous. So like, as far as like my doctor told me, my surgery was textbook. Like he had zero issues, and my recovery is like right on track. I think. I think he told me like when I was going over like my pain and like how that subsided, he's like the pain lasted a little longer for you than it tends to for people, but like it's not unheard of. It's just a little outside of the curve.
Well, especially since that was like your first experience, surgery wise.
Right. Exactly. And
I could see that.
Yeah, but other than that, I mean, it's been about as good as I could possibly have expected it to be. And I mean, like I attribute a lot of that to one, like obviously having a good surgeon, but the nurses were awesome at the hospital. Like healthcare as a trans person is always like a big question mark, a question mark at the least, and like terrifying at the most. I don't have a single. I don't think I have a single trans friend who doesn't have some kind of healthcare related horror story. Like I'm the only one that's never had anything overtly bad happen to me in seeking healthcare. And so like I was really nervous about like the surgeon I had gotten to know over the course of 6 months, and like his whole staff at his office, they were all great. But I knew like the nurses in the hospital, like who knows? But they all turned out to be great. So like that was super helpful. And then obviously my girlfriend and my family were like super, super helpful. So like I attribute a lot of that to this. So, like there was very little that I actually had to worry about, aside from just like doing what I need to do to make sure like I'm, getting enough to drink and getting enough to eat and stuff. 'Cause those things were kind of difficult at first. So yeah, it's been a pretty all around good experience for me. I mean, as good as it can be, having surgery and having 5 holes cut through your abdomen, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like much fun.
Oh, I've had
no, it's and I mean, I'm thankful that laparoscopic surgery is a thing, and they don't have to open your entire stomach up to do it now. Like, I'm super grateful for that. So like, I try to keep my complaining to a minimum, because I know that's not, it's definitely not been like that forever. But I tell you what, that car ride home from the hospital, even on a heavy dose of Percocet, like. It was probably the most painful thing I've ever been through in my life. Just every little bump and turn and everything.
Oh, yeah. I can say as a person who's had 2 C-sections, oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, my husband was with me for both of them, particularly the first one. And he got to see stuff that you don't normally get to see because my daughter had gotten stuck. So they were, put it this way, taking organs out of my body and putting them off to the side. And he got to see all of that.
Yeah, that's no fun.
Wow.
Yeah. They couldn't get her out.
Yeah,
so.
they had a guy standing on the table pulling her back.
Yeah, trying to get my daughter out because she was stuck. They were losing both of us. And so he got to see them like actually take stuff out of me, put it to the side, and, try and straddle me and get her out. And so that car ride home, that was fun.
Jesus, I can imagine.
And then I had a set of twins after that I was in the hospital with for 4 months, and delivered them with the C-section as well. So yeah, I totally get the sticking holes in you and cutting you open.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's not a contest, but like that makes me feel bad for complaining.
No, I just mean I totally understand that car ride
Yeah.
home. It's not comfortable at all.
Yeah, and then obviously like coughing and sneezing.
Oh
God,
God, don't
yeah.
even start on that.
I literally I only sneezed once, thankfully. Like because I'm pain's pretty minimal now, like minimal to non-existent. But like there was, I think it was about a week or so after I came home, and I was still feeling it pretty hard, and I sneezed once, and it was just like. I mean, I if I remember correctly, I yelped like a dog, and then just sat on the couch crying, like, "Oh my God, I don't ever want to do that again."
Oh, I totally get that. I definitely get that.
Yeah. Well, this has been an amazing hour. So I got to tell you that. It's one of my
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
yeah, one of my best interviews so far. Considering
Well,
we've only had like 5, so
That's cool. I'll
You're
still
up there.
take
You're
it.
in the top 5.
I'll still take it. Yeah.
So, if our listeners want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that? And where can they find you?
Getting a hold of me, Facebook really is the way. Callie Wright, CalliewRight. I'm at Gaytheist Callie on Twitter. I don't use Twitter very often though, so don't have high expectations of me there. And then the podcast is the Gaytheist Manifesto. You can find us pretty much anywhere you can find podcasts, iTunes, Spreaker, Stitcher, the whole lot. And then the blog is the Gaytheist Manifesto on the Pathos Network. So if blogging is your thing, that's a way to see what we do too.
Excellent. And we'll put all those links that I can find on the show notes.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun. Can you tell I'm a person who enjoys conversation? Going back to our talk earlier.
Yeah. I definitely enjoyed this. Hopefully we'll have you back again sometime.
That would be great.
For another yakking session.
Yeah, this is going to be our yakking sessions.
I love it. Well, it fits. I wish my podcast title had something where I could play on that. I've tried a couple of really cheesy things, and I'm like, this is the worst. But like, it really fits. It really fits with your guys' show, though, so it makes sense.
All right, cool. All right, so thanks for coming on, and we'll talk to you later.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Okay, and that was our interview, which was fantastic.
Yakking session.
Yes, you are correct, our yakking session. But I do have to go, after listening back to a little bit of it, I have to apologize. I don't ever shut up. What is wrong with me?
That's why we call this secular yakking.
I mean, I just go on, I give too much information. It's like, oh my God, I hear myself and I can't stop. Like, now. So, okay, I'm done with that. Your turn.
All right. So again, thanks Callie for coming on the show.
Yes, it was great.
As I said, probably one of the best interview yakking sessions I've had.
Yes, very enjoyable. I liked it a lot.
Yeah. And if this works out, and I think it will, we'll probably have a lot more of these.
Yes, from time to time.
More often than you want.
Again, time to time.
I've got a few scheduled already.
We have potters to do and, regular news to cover.
We'll have to work some in. Because I think our listeners want to hear other people.
I'm good with it. I'm just telling you, time from time. Not all the time. Got that?
Yeah, okay. I don't understand your words.
It's called compromise.
I don't understand your words.
How do you think we've been together 23 years? It's called compromise. You can do it.
No.
Oh, don't start with me. Anyways, to the show, please.
To the show. Well, I think that's the show.
I think that is the show. It's a very long show. Hopefully everyone gets to listen to the whole thing.
Yeah, they should. And if they don't, oh well.
Well, aren't you freaking sweet?
I am.
Since when?
I don't know.
Anyways, I think you need to stop talking and call it a night.
Yeah, I'm done yakking.
Me too.
We always like to hear your feedback, so leave us a voicemail at 704-802-YAK or an email at podcast@secularyakking.com.
More input.
All comments are welcome. We like to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly. You also can find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Google+.
If you like our show, head over to your podcast directory of choice and leave us a 5-star review. If you really like the show, support the show on our Patreon page.
I'd buy that for $1.
And we'll be back next week with more yakking to please your eardrums.
Bye-bye, boys.
Have fun storming the castle.
Think it'll work?
It would take a miracle. Bye-bye.